Zoe Parker stood frozen in the marble hallway of Sterling and Associates, champagne bottle in one hand and celebratory banner in the other. Through the glass walls of Conference Room B, she watched her husband of 5 years lock lips with his boss in what could only be described as pure passion. Patricia Hamilton's perfectly manicured hands tangled in Ryan's dark hair while his arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her closer against the mahogany conference table. The champagne bottle slipped from Zoe's numb fingers, hitting the floor with a dull thud that echoed through the empty hallway. Neither Ryan nor Patricia heard it. They were too lost in each other, too consumed by whatever forbidden romance had been brewing behind Zoe's back. The banner reading, "Congratulations on your promotion," felt like a cruel joke now, mocking her from where it hung limply in her other hand. Zoe's breath caught in her throat as she watched Patricia's hands move to Ryan's tie, loosening it with practiced ease. This wasn't a first-time kiss. This was intimate. Familiar. The way Patricia's fingers traced Ryan's collar, the way he knew exactly how to hold her, it spoke of countless stolen moments, secret meetings, and a relationship that had been growing right under everyone's noses. The African-American marketing executive had always prided herself on being observant. It was what made her so good at her job, what had earned her a corner office at her own firm by age 32. But somehow she had missed this. Somehow the man she had trusted with her heart, her future, her dreams of children and growing old together, had been living a double life. Patricia pulled away from the kiss, her blonde hair slightly mussed, and whispered something that made Ryan throw back his head and laugh. The sound of his laughter, so carefree, so genuine, hit Zoe harder than the kiss had. When was the last time he had laughed like that with her? When was the last time she had seen that spark in his eyes when he looked at her? Zoe's mind raced back through recent months. The late nights Ryan claimed were due to the demanding project that would lead to his promotion. The mysterious phone calls he would take in the other room. The way he had grown distant, distracted, always checking his phone during their dinner dates. The expensive cologne she didn't recognize. The credit card charges at restaurants she had never been to. All the pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. The promotion celebration she had planned so carefully, taking time off work, buying his favorite champagne, even getting her hair done at that expensive salon, suddenly felt like the cruelest irony. She had come here to celebrate his success, only to discover that his success came with a price she never knew she was paying. Through the glass, she watched Patricia adjust her blouse and check her reflection in the conference room's mirror. The woman was stunning, there was no denying that. Tall, elegant, with the kind of commanding presence that probably made men like Ryan feel important just by association. She was everything Zoe wasn't: older, established in the company hierarchy, with the power to make or break careers. Ryan straightened his tie and ran his hands through his hair, trying to compose himself. The guilty expression on his face as he glanced toward the door made Zoe's stomach churn. He knew what he was doing was wrong. He knew he was destroying their marriage, their life together, and he was doing it anyway. Zoe forced herself to take a step back, then another, until she was pressed against the wall beside the elevator. Her heart pounded so hard she was sure the sound would give her away, but the couple in the conference room remained oblivious to her presence. They were too busy planning their next move, their next stolen moment, their next betrayal. The elevator dinged behind her, and Zoe quickly grabbed the champagne bottle and crumpled the banner into a ball. She couldn't let them see her like this. She couldn't give them the satisfaction of knowing they had broken her. Not yet. Not until she figured out what to do with this devastating knowledge. As the elevator doors opened, Zoe took one last look at the conference room. Patricia was now sitting on the edge of the table, her legs crossed, while Ryan leaned against the wall opposite her. They looked like they belonged together, like they had found something in each other that completed them. The realization that her husband had found his perfect match in someone else's arms nearly brought her to her knees. But Zoe Parker was not a woman who fell apart easily. She was not a woman who crumbled under pressure. She stepped into the elevator, pressed the button for the parking garage, and began to think. The initial shock was wearing off, replaced by something colder, more calculating. If Ryan thought he could humiliate her, betray her, and walk away unscathed, he was about to learn just how wrong he was. The elevator descended, taking her away from the scene of her marriage's destruction, but not before she had memorized every detail. The time: 6:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. Patricia's outfit: a navy blue dress that probably cost more than most people's rent. Ryan's new confidence, the way he carried himself like a man who thought he was untouchable. As the parking garage came into view, Zoe made a decision that would change everything. She wasn't going to confront them. She wasn't going to scream or cry or make a scene. She was going to do something much worse. She was going to make sure that the very thing they thought they had gained would be the thing that destroyed them both. The champagne bottle felt heavier in her hand now, not as a celebration, but as a reminder of everything she was about to lose and everything she was determined to take back. Zoe sat in her car for 20 minutes before she trusted herself to drive. The parking garage's fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across her face as she stared at her reflection in the rearview mirror. Her brown eyes, usually bright with determination, looked hollow. Her carefully styled hair suddenly seemed ridiculous. Who had she been trying to impress? The husband who was upstairs kissing another woman? The drive home to their suburban house in Riverside felt endless. Every red light gave her more time to think, more time for the betrayal to sink in. She passed the coffee shop where Ryan had proposed 3 years ago, the park where they had their first date, the restaurant where they celebrated every anniversary. Each landmark of their relationship now felt tainted, poisoned by the knowledge that while she had been building their life together, he had been building another one with someone else. Their house looked the same as always: the blue shutters she had picked out, the garden she maintained, the welcome mat that suddenly felt like a lie. Inside, everything was exactly as she had left it that morning. The breakfast dishes Ryan had promised to wash still sat in the sink. The coffee maker was still on, burning the last drops of coffee into bitter sludge. Even the note she had left him about the surprise celebration was still on the counter, right where she had placed it next to his wallet. Zoe walked through their home like a stranger, seeing everything through new eyes. The photos on the mantel told the story of a happy couple: their wedding day, vacations, family gatherings. But when had they taken the last photo together? She couldn't remember. When had they stopped documenting their happiness? She moved to Ryan's home office, a room she rarely entered. It felt like an invasion of privacy, but that concept seemed laughable now. What privacy did they have left? She began searching through his desk drawers, not sure what she was looking for but knowing she needed to understand the scope of his betrayal. In the bottom drawer, hidden under old tax documents, she found a credit card statement she had never seen. The charges painted a clear picture: expensive dinners at restaurants across town, charges at hotels she didn't recognize, flowers from the florist he claimed to have forgotten about. The dates went back 8 months. 8 months of lies, 8 months of deception, 8 months of her husband living a double life while she planned their future. Her phone buzzed with a text from Ryan: "Working late again. Don't wait up. Love you." The casual cruelty of it made her laugh out loud, a bitter sound that echoed through the empty house. Love you. The words that had once made her heart skip now felt like daggers. How could he type those words while another woman's lipstick was probably still on his collar? Zoe poured herself a glass of wine and sat at their kitchen table, spreading out the evidence she had found. Credit card statements, receipts, even a parking stub from the Hilton downtown dated just last week, the same night he had told her he was at a company dinner. The lies were so intricate, so detailed. This wasn't a moment of weakness or a mistake. This was a calculated betrayal, planned and executed with precision. She thought about Patricia Hamilton, the woman she had met only twice at company functions. Patricia was in her early 40s, divorced, with no children. She had built her career in a male-dominated field and commanded respect wherever she went. Zoe had actually admired her during those brief encounters, impressed by her intelligence and wit. Now that admiration curdled into something else entirely. The more Zoe thought about it, the more she realized how perfectly orchestrated this whole situation was. Patricia had the power to promote Ryan, to advance his career in ways Zoe never could. She had the financial independence to wine and dine him at expensive restaurants, to book hotel rooms for their affairs. She was everything a man like Ryan would want: successful, sophisticated, and completely available. But Patricia Hamilton had made one crucial mistake. She had chosen to have an affair with a married man, violating not only her own moral compass but also her company's strict policies about workplace relationships. Sterling and Associates was a conservative firm that prided itself on family values and ethical business practices. If the board of directors knew about this relationship, both Patricia and Ryan would be out of jobs faster than they could pack their offices. Zoe's phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. It was her best friend and business partner, Naomi. "Hey girl, how did the surprise go? Did Ryan love it?" Zoe's voice came out steadier than she expected. "It was definitely a surprise. You sound weird. What happened?" "Nothing I can't handle. I'll tell you tomorrow." After hanging up, Zoe realized she had made another decision. She wasn't going to tell anyone what she had discovered, not yet. This was her situation to handle, her marriage to end, her revenge to plan. The fewer people who knew, the better. She spent the rest of the evening going through every inch of their shared life. Their joint bank account showed no unusual activity. Ryan was too smart to use their shared money for his affair. But their credit card showed a pattern of charges that made no sense unless you knew about Patricia. Business lunches that lasted 3 hours. Gas station charges in parts of town Ryan had no reason to visit. Small purchases at jewelry stores that had never resulted in gifts for her. By the time Ryan came home at 11:30, Zoe had assembled a complete picture of his betrayal. She had also made peace with what she had to do next. When she heard his key in the lock, she quickly put everything away and positioned herself on the couch with a book, as if she had been reading peacefully all evening. "Hey beautiful," Ryan said, kissing the top of her head. The smell of Patricia's perfume still clung to his clothes. "Sorry I'm so late." Patricia wanted to go over the quarterly reports one more time. "That's okay," Zoe replied, not looking up from her book. "I understand how important work is to you." Ryan sat down next to her, reaching for her hand. "I know I've been distracted lately with this promotion and everything. Once things settle down we should plan a vacation. Maybe that trip to Italy we've been talking about." The ease with which he lied to her face was almost impressive. Italy had been her dream, something she had mentioned dozens of times. Now he was using it as just another tool to keep her complacent while he continued his affair. "That sounds nice," she said, finally meeting his eyes. "I love you too, Ryan." The words tasted like poison in her mouth, but they served their purpose. Ryan smiled, squeezed her hand and headed upstairs to shower. No doubt washing off the evidence of his evening with Patricia. As Zoe listened to the water running upstairs, she made a mental list of everything she needed to do. Research Patricia Hamilton's background. Learn about Sterling and Associates policies and procedures. Document everything. Build a case so airtight that when she finally revealed the truth, there would be no room for denial, no chance for excuses, no possibility of escape. Ryan had chosen to destroy their marriage. Now Zoe was going to destroy everything he had built with Patricia, piece by piece, until there was nothing left but the ruins of their deception. The next morning, Zoe woke up before her alarm and lay in bed watching Ryan sleep. His face looked peaceful, innocent even, with no trace of the guilt that should have been eating him alive. She studied the man she had married, trying to find some sign of the betrayal that lived inside him, but there was nothing. He looked exactly like the man she had fallen in love with 6 years ago. Ryan stirred and opened his eyes, smiling when he saw her watching him. "Good morning, beautiful. You're up early." "Couldn't sleep," she said, which was true. Her mind had been racing all night, planning and plotting. "I kept thinking about your promotion. I'm so proud of you." The guilt flickered across his face for just a moment before he covered it with a smile. "Thanks, babe. It means everything to have your support." Zoe got up and started her usual morning routine, but everything felt different now. Making Ryan's coffee felt like preparing poison. Ironing his shirt felt like dressing him for his own execution. She performed all the duties of a loving wife while her mind worked on an entirely different level. After Ryan left for work, Zoe called in sick to her own job. She had built up enough goodwill and vacation time that taking a few days to recover from a bug wouldn't raise any eyebrows. What she really needed was time to research and plan. Her first stop was the public library, where she could use a computer without leaving a digital trail on her own devices. She researched everything she could find about Patricia Hamilton. The woman's professional biography was impressive: MBA from Northwestern, 15 years climbing the corporate ladder, a reputation for being tough but fair. Her personal life was more interesting. Divorced from tech entrepreneur Marcus Hamilton 2 years ago in what the business journals called an amicable split. No children, no criminal record, no obvious scandals. But Zoe dug deeper. She found old social media posts, archived news articles, business networking profiles. Patricia had a pattern of close professional relationships with male colleagues. There were photos from company events where she seemed particularly friendly with various men, always maintaining plausible deniability but never quite crossing obvious lines. Until now. Next, Zoe researched Sterling and Associates itself. The company's employee handbook, which was publicly available on their website, contained a clear section about workplace relationships. Romantic relationships between supervisors and subordinates were strictly prohibited. Employees who violated this policy faced immediate termination and possible legal action if company resources were misused. The legal action part caught Zoe's attention. If she could prove that Patricia and Ryan had used company resources for their affair, company cars, expense accounts, office space, they wouldn't just lose their jobs. They could face criminal charges. Zoe drove to Ryan's office building and parked across the street. She wasn't stalking, she told herself. She was conducting reconnaissance. For 2 hours she watched the comings and goings of Sterling and Associates employees. She saw Patricia arrive in her silver BMW at 8:45. She saw Ryan arrive 10 minutes later in the Honda they had bought together last year. She saw them leave together at lunchtime and return an hour and a half later, plenty of time for more than just a meal. Her phone rang. Ryan's name appeared on the screen. "Hey honey, how are you feeling?" "Still pretty sick," she said, which was true in a way. The sight of him getting into Patricia's car had made her stomach turn. "I'm just resting." "Good. Listen, I might be late again tonight. Patricia wants to go over my presentation for the board meeting next week." Another lie, delivered so smoothly that Zoe almost admired his skill. "Okay. I'll probably just order takeout and go to bed early. I love you, Zoe. Get some rest." After hanging up, Zoe sat in her car and felt something shift inside her. The last piece of hope that this was all a mistake, that there was some innocent explanation, finally died. Ryan wasn't just cheating on her. He was lying to her face, using her sympathy to cover his tracks, making her complicit in her own betrayal. She drove home and began the next phase of her research. Using her marketing skills, she created a fake social media profile and began connecting with Sterling and Associates employees. Not anyone who would know her, but junior staff members who might be willing to share gossip about office politics. Within hours, she had a network of connections who were happy to chat with someone who claimed to be considering a job at the company. The conversations were enlightening. Several people mentioned that Patricia seemed to have favorites among the male employees. A few hinted that her decision-making wasn't always based solely on merit. One particularly chatty administrative assistant even mentioned that Patricia had been spending a lot of time with that new guy Ryan, and that some people were starting to talk. Zoe took screenshots of every conversation, saved every piece of evidence. She was building a case, brick by brick, that would leave no room for doubt when the time came to reveal the truth. That evening she cooked Ryan's favorite meal and opened a bottle of wine. When he came home at nearly midnight, claiming exhaustion from his presentation preparation, she greeted him with understanding and affection. "You work so hard," she said, massaging his shoulders. Patricia is lucky to have someone so dedicated on her team. Ryan tensed slightly under her touch. "She's a good boss. Demanding but fair. I'd love to meet her properly someday. Maybe we could have dinner together, the three of us." "That's not really her style," Ryan said quickly. "She keeps work and personal life very separate." Another lie. Zoe had seen photos of Patricia at company social events, laughing and socializing with colleagues and their spouses. The woman definitely mixed business with pleasure. She just didn't want to meet the wives of the men she was seducing. Over the next few days, Zoe established a routine. She would wake up early, play the supportive wife, then spend her days gathering intelligence. She learned Patricia's schedule, her habits, her favorite restaurants. She discovered that Patricia lived alone in a downtown condo, drove the same route to work every day, and had a standing appointment at an expensive spa every Friday afternoon. More importantly, Zoe began to understand the power dynamic at Sterling and Associates. Patricia wasn't just Ryan's boss, she was being considered for a promotion to regional director, a position that would give her control over multiple offices and hundreds of employees. Ryan's promotion was directly tied to Patricia's success. If Patricia moved up, she could take Ryan with her. If she fell from grace, he would fall too. By the end of the week, Zoe had assembled a comprehensive dossier on Patricia Hamilton and mapped out the structure of Sterling and Associates. She understood the company's vulnerabilities, its pressure points, and exactly how to apply maximum damage with minimum risk to herself. The time for passive observation was over. Phase 2 of her plan was about to begin, and it would require her to be more cunning, more calculating, and more ruthless than she had ever been in her life. Patricia Hamilton had chosen the wrong woman to cross, and Ryan had chosen the wrong woman to betray. Monday morning brought new resolve. Zoe had spent the weekend researching corporate investigation techniques and legal procedures for documenting workplace misconduct. She approached this like any other marketing campaign, with careful planning, clear objectives, and measurable outcomes. Her first target was Ryan's computer. While he showered, she quickly inserted a small USB drive into his laptop and copied his entire email folder and browser history. The process took less than 3 minutes, but those minutes revealed months of digital evidence. Email chains with Patricia that started professional but gradually became more personal. Browser searches for restaurants Patricia had mentioned liking. A deleted folder of photos that made Zoe's stomach turn. The emails were particularly damaging. What started as work discussions slowly evolved into flirtation, then into explicit arrangements for meetings. Ryan had even used his company email to book hotel rooms, violating Sterling and Associates' technology use policy. Each message was time-stamped and saved on company servers, creating an unalterable record of their affair. After Ryan left for work, Zoe drove to Sterling and Associates and positioned herself in the coffee shop across the street. She had purchased a small digital camera with a powerful zoom lens, and she spent the morning photographing Patricia and Ryan's interactions. They thought they were being discreet, but their body language told a different story. The way Patricia's hand lingered on Ryan's arm during conversations. The way they stood just slightly too close in the elevator. The way they looked at each other when they thought no one was watching. Around noon, Zoe followed Patricia to lunch. The older woman met with James Hamilton, Patricia's ex-husband, at an upscale restaurant downtown. Zoe managed to get a table with a clear view and watched as the former couple had what appeared to be a very friendly conversation. They laughed together, shared food from each other's plates, and when James walked Patricia to her car, he kissed her cheek in a way that suggested their relationship was far from over. This was interesting. Patricia's divorce settlement had been generous, according to the public records Zoe had found. If Patricia and James were reconciling, or even just maintaining an intimate friendship, it would complicate her relationship with Ryan significantly. More importantly, it would give Zoe another angle of attack. That afternoon, Zoe made her first direct move. She created a professional-looking email address and sent a message to Sterling and Associates Human Resources Department. To whom it may concern, I am a former employee considering returning to Sterling and Associates and would like to review the current employee handbook, particularly the sections regarding workplace relationships and professional conduct. Could you please send me the most recent version? Thank you. Within 2 hours, she had a complete copy of the company's policies, including detailed procedures for reporting misconduct and the specific consequences for policy violations. Workplace relationships between supervisors and subordinates weren't just discouraged, they were grounds for immediate termination. Any employee found guilty of using company resources for personal gain could face criminal charges for theft. Zoe also discovered something else interesting in the employee handbook. Sterling and Associates had a whistleblower protection policy that offered substantial rewards for employees who reported serious misconduct. The company had recently faced several lawsuits for discrimination and was actively trying to clean up its corporate culture. They would be very motivated to act quickly and decisively on any credible allegations. That evening, Ryan came home with flowers. Cheap grocery store roses, not the expensive arrangements he had been sending Patricia. Just wanted to remind you how much I love you, he said, kissing her forehead. I know I've been working a lot lately. Zoe accepted the flowers graciously, even as she calculated their cost against the $200 charges she had found on his secret credit card for Patricia's birthday bouquet last month. They're beautiful, she said. What's the occasion? Do I need an occasion to buy my wife flowers? The guilt was eating at him, Zoe realized. Good. Let him suffer a little bit before she destroyed his life completely. Over dinner, she casually brought up Patricia. How is your boss handling her promotion to regional director? That must be exciting for the whole team. Ryan paused mid-bite. How did you know about that? The announcement hasn't been made yet. Zoe had learned about Patricia's potential promotion through her network of junior employees, but she couldn't say that. I think you mentioned it last week. Maybe I misunderstood. The board is still making their decision, Ryan said carefully. Nothing's been announced officially. But his reaction told Zoe everything she needed to know. Patricia's promotion wasn't guaranteed. She was still being evaluated, still vulnerable. If the board discovered her affair with a subordinate, her career would be over. And Ryan, as her willing participant, would go down with her. After dinner, while Ryan watched television, Zoe retreated to her home office and began crafting her masterpiece. Using her marketing expertise, she created a comprehensive presentation that documented Patricia and Ryan's affair with timeline precision. Email screenshots, credit card records, photos, witness statements from other employees, everything laid out in a professional format that would be impossible to dismiss or explain away. But she wasn't ready to deploy this information yet. First, she needed to gather more intelligence about the company's decision-making process. She needed to know exactly when Patricia's promotion would be decided, who would make that decision, and how to time her revelation for maximum impact. She also needed to understand the personal cost to Patricia. The woman clearly cared about her professional reputation and her relationship with her ex-husband. Destroying both simultaneously would be far more effective than attacking just one. Zoe worked until nearly 2 in the morning, perfecting her evidence file and planning her next moves. When she finally went to bed, Ryan was already asleep, snoring peacefully like a man without a care in the world. But his peaceful sleep wouldn't last much longer. Zoe was about to turn his world upside down, and when she was finished, both he and Patricia would understand the true cost of betrayal. The only question now was timing. Zoe needed to be patient, to wait for exactly the right moment to strike. Her revenge would be a work of art, carefully orchestrated to cause maximum damage while keeping her own hands clean. Patricia Hamilton and Ryan Parker had made their bed. Soon they would have to lie in it separately, unemployed and completely ruined. By Thursday of the following week, Zoe had perfected the art of being invisible. She had learned Patricia's routine so thoroughly that she could predict where the woman would be at any given time. She knew that Patricia bought her morning coffee from the same shop every day, that she always parked in the same section of the garage, and that she had a standing appointment for a manicure every Tuesday at 4 o'clock. More importantly, Zoe had begun to build relationships with Patricia's enemies. Every office had them people who had been passed over for promotions, who had been treated unfairly, who harbored resentments and grievances. Zoe identified these people through her growing network of social media connections and began carefully cultivating them. Jennifer Walsh was a senior account manager who had been with Sterling and Associates for 12 years. She had applied for Patricia's current position 3 years ago and been passed over despite having more experience. Through their online conversations, Zoe learned that Jennifer suspected Patricia's rise had more to do with politics than performance. "She's very good at managing up," Jennifer had written in a private message. "Always making sure the right people notice her contributions. Some of us have wondered how she does it." Thomas Chin was another useful contact. He was a junior partner who had been reporting to Patricia for 2 years. His carefully worded complaints suggested he had witnessed inappropriate behavior but felt powerless to report it without proof. "Let's just say Patricia has her favorites," he had told Zoe during a coffee shop conversation she had arranged under the pretense of considering a job at Sterling and Associates. "Merit isn't the only factor in advancement decisions around here." The most valuable connection was Rebecca Santos, an administrative assistant who worked closely with the executive team. Rebecca had access to calendars, expense reports, and travel arrangements. She also had strong opinions about fairness and professional conduct. "I've been tracking some unusual patterns in expense reports," Rebecca confided during their third meeting. "Executive lunches that last 3 hours. Hotel bookings that don't correspond to any business travel I can find. Someone should be paying attention to these things." Zoe listened sympathetically while taking mental notes. Rebecca was clearly suspicious but hadn't connected the dots yet. With a little encouragement, she could become a powerful ally or at least a credible witness. The breakthrough came when Zoe discovered that Patricia had a history of inappropriate relationships. Through careful questioning of former employees she found on LinkedIn, she learned that Patricia had been counseled about her conduct at her previous company. No formal charges had been filed, but there had been whispers about favoritism and boundary issues. Armed with this information, Zoe began phase 3 of her plan, creating a narrative. She didn't want to be seen as the vengeful wife seeking revenge. She wanted to be seen as a concerned citizen protecting the integrity of a respected company. She scheduled a lunch meeting with Rebecca Santos under the pretense of discussing employment opportunities. They met at a quiet restaurant where Zoe carefully steered the conversation toward workplace ethics. "I've heard wonderful things about Sterling and Associates' commitment to professional standards," Zoe said. "In my experience, companies are only as strong as their ethical foundation." Rebecca nodded enthusiastically. "Absolutely. That's why it's so frustrating when you see potential violations being ignored." "What kind of violations?" Rebecca lowered her voice. "The kind that make you wonder if someone's personal relationships are influencing business decisions. The kind that make other employees lose faith in the system." Zoe leaned forward with apparent concern. "That sounds serious. Have you reported these concerns?" "To whom?" "The person I'd need to report to is part of the problem." This was perfect. Rebecca had just admitted that Patricia was involved in unethical behavior and that the normal reporting channels were compromised. Zoe filed this conversation away as potential evidence. That same week, she had similar conversations with Jennifer Walsh and Thomas Chin. Each person revealed additional pieces of information about Patricia's conduct and the toxic environment it was creating. None of them had the complete picture, but together their testimonies would paint a damning portrait of systematic misconduct. Zoe also began documenting the financial impact of the affair. Using the expense reports Rebecca had mentioned, She calculated that Ryan and Patricia had charged at least $15,000 in personal expenses to the company over the past 8 months. Dinners, hotel rooms, even a weekend trip to Napa Valley that Patricia had disguised as a client development retreat. The theft charges alone would be enough to destroy both their careers and potentially land them in jail. But Zoe wanted more than just criminal consequences. She wanted complete and total destruction of everything they had built together. Her opportunity came when she learned about the board of directors meeting scheduled for the following month. Patricia's promotion to regional director would be the main agenda item, and the decision was expected to be unanimous. The board members were conservative businessmen who valued reputation and integrity above all else. If they discovered Patricia's affair before the meeting, her promotion would be dead in the water. But Zoe had an even better idea. What if the board discovered the affair during the meeting? What if Patricia's misconduct was revealed in front of the entire executive team, with no opportunity for damage control or private negotiations? She began planning what she privately called the presentation, a carefully choreographed revelation that would destroy both Patricia and Ryan while establishing Zoe as a credible whistleblower acting in the company's best interests. The key was timing and credibility. Zoe needed to be seen as someone who had stumbled upon this information reluctantly, someone who was reporting it out of civic duty rather than personal vengeance. She also needed multiple sources of evidence that couldn't be dismissed as fabrication or misinterpretation. Over the weekend she refined her strategy. She would approach the situation as if she were launching a marketing campaign for a client with clear objectives, target audiences, and measurable outcomes. The objective was simple: destroy Patricia and Ryan's careers while protecting herself from any fallout. The target audiences were multiple: the board of directors who needed to see Patricia as a liability, the employees who needed to understand that misconduct would be punished, and Ryan himself who needed to understand the true cost of his betrayal. By Sunday evening, Zoe had a complete battle plan. She would spend the next 2 weeks gathering final pieces of evidence and positioning herself as a credible source. Then she would strike with precision and devastating effect. Ryan came home that night with Chinese takeout and apologies for working late again. As they sat at their kitchen table sharing lo mein and lies, Zoe smiled and played the supportive wife one more time. Soon, very soon, the charade would be over. Monday morning found Zoe at her computer, diving deep into the digital forensics that would seal Patricia and Ryan's fate. She had learned that Sterling and Associates used a cloud-based email system that automatically backed up all communications to company servers. Even deleted emails were retained for 7 years for legal compliance purposes. This meant that every flirtatious message, every clandestine meeting arrangement, every violation of company policy was permanently archived and discoverable. Using her marketing background, Zoe understood that the most damaging evidence would come from their own digital footprints. People felt safe behind their keyboards, saying things in writing they would never say out loud. Patricia and Ryan had left a trail of evidence that would be impossible to deny or explain away. She started with Ryan's laptop again, this time using more sophisticated recovery software to find deleted files and cleared browser histories. What she discovered exceeded even her expectations. Ryan had saved photos from their hotel encounters, screenshots of Patricia's private messages, even recordings of voicemails she had left him. He had kept these files in a hidden folder labeled Project Files, apparently thinking that if anyone found them, they would assume they were work-related. The photos were particularly damning. Time-stamped images taken in luxury hotel suites during business hours, showing Patricia and Ryan in various states of undress. The hotel receipts matched up perfectly with Ryan's expense reports, proving that company funds had paid for their romantic getaways. But the real goldmine was Patricia's email account. Through a combination of social engineering and technical skill, Zoe had managed to gain access to Patricia's password-protected files. The woman had been remarkably careless with her digital security, using the same password for multiple accounts and saving sensitive information in unencrypted files. Patricia's emails revealed the full scope of their relationship and its impact on company operations. She had been giving Ryan preferential treatment for months, assigning him the best clients, protecting him from criticism, and fast-tracking his promotion despite his lack of qualifications. Other employees had been passed over, projects had been mismanaged, and company resources had been systematically misused. More disturbing was the pattern of behavior that emerged from Patricia's older emails. This wasn't her first inappropriate relationship with a subordinate. There had been others: a junior associate named Brian Thompson who had received an unexpected promotion 2 years ago, a client services manager named Scott Williams who had suddenly been transferred to a better position after a series of late-night strategy sessions with Patricia. The pattern was clear. Patricia used her position of power to seduce younger, ambitious men, then advanced their careers in exchange for sexual favors. It was a textbook case of sexual harassment and abuse of power, made worse by the fact that it had been going on for years without consequences. Zoe documented everything meticulously. She created spreadsheets showing the correlation between Patricia's relationships and promotion decisions. She compiled email chains that showed Patricia explicitly trading career advancement for personal favors. She even found evidence that Patricia had retaliated against employees who had rejected her advances, giving them poor performance reviews and blocking their advancement opportunities. The financial evidence was equally damaging. Patricia and Ryan had charged over $25,000 in personal expenses to company accounts over the past year. Hotel rooms, expensive dinners, weekend trips, even jewelry purchases had been disguised as business expenses. The accounting department had either been too trusting or too intimidated to question these charges. Wednesday brought an unexpected development. Zoe was monitoring Patricia's email when she saw a message that made her blood run cold. Patricia was planning to leave Sterling and Associates. She had been secretly interviewing for a position at a competing firm, and she wanted Ryan to come with her. They were planning to announce their relationship publicly once they both landed jobs at the new company. This changed everything. If Patricia and Ryan left Sterling and Associates together, they would escape consequences for their current misconduct. They would start fresh at a new company where their relationship would be legitimate and their past behavior would be irrelevant. Zoe's carefully planned revenge would be meaningless if they simply walked away unscathed. She needed to accelerate her timeline. Instead of waiting for the board meeting next month, she needed to act immediately. But rushing her plan could lead to mistakes and she couldn't afford any errors. She needed to find a way to expose them before they could escape, while still maintaining the credibility and documentation that would ensure their complete destruction. The solution came from an unexpected source. Rebecca Santos, the administrative assistant, reached out to Zoe through their professional networking connection. "I hope you don't mind me contacting you directly," Rebecca wrote, "but I wanted to give you a heads up about something. There are rumors that some major changes are coming to the executive team. If you're still considering joining Sterling and Associates, you might want to wait and see how things shake out." Zoe arranged to meet Rebecca for coffee that afternoon. The assistant was clearly troubled by something and needed little encouragement to share her concerns. "I probably shouldn't be telling you this," Rebecca said, glancing around the crowded coffee shop, "but I think something inappropriate is happening between Patricia Hamilton and one of her subordinates. I've seen too many suspicious emails, too many unexplained expenses, too many closed-door meetings that run way over schedule." "That sounds serious," Zoe said, maintaining her concerned citizen facade. "Have you documented any of this?" "I've been keeping copies of things that seem questionable just in case someone asks questions later. But I don't know what to do with the information. I can't report it to Patricia, obviously, and her boss is rarely in the office." This was perfect. Rebecca had been independently gathering evidence, which would add credibility to Zoe's eventual revelation. Even better, Rebecca was clearly ready to come forward with her concerns if she had the right support and protection. "What if I told you that you might not be alone in your concerns?" Zoe said carefully. "What if there were other people who had noticed similar patterns?" Rebecca's eyes widened. "Do you know something? I might know someone who could help you report this through the proper channels. Someone who understands corporate investigations and could ensure that your concerns are taken seriously without putting your job at risk." They spent the next hour discussing the evidence Rebecca had collected and the proper procedures for reporting workplace misconduct. By the time they parted ways, Zoe had gained a powerful ally and learned that several other employees had similar suspicions. That evening, Zoe finalized her plan. She would position herself as an independent consultant who had been hired to investigate anonymous complaints about executive misconduct. She would present her findings to the board of directors as a professional report, complete with documentation and witness testimony. Rebecca and the other suspicious employees would provide credibility and cover for her investigation. The beauty of this approach was that it removed any appearance of personal vendetta. Zoe would be seen as a neutral third party who had uncovered serious violations of company policy through legitimate investigative work. Patricia and Ryan would have no way to dismiss her findings as the revenge of a scorned wife. She spent the rest of the week preparing her presentation and coordinating with her network of employee witnesses. Everything was falling into place perfectly. Soon, very soon, Patricia Hamilton and Ryan Parker would face the consequences of their choices. But first, Zoe had one more surprise to arrange, something that would ensure their destruction was not only complete but also very, very public. Friday evening brought Zoe to the most delicate part of her plan. She sat in her car outside James Hamilton's downtown office building, watching the successful tech entrepreneur through his corner office window. Patricia's ex-husband was working late, just as she had hoped. This conversation would require privacy and careful timing. James Hamilton was the key to Patricia's complete destruction. Their divorce may have been amicable according to the press, but Zoe had done her research. She knew about the business partnerships they still shared, the charity boards they served on together, and most importantly, the social circles where Patricia's reputation mattered most. James had the power to destroy Patricia's carefully cultivated image in ways that went far beyond her career. Zoe had spent hours crafting her approach. She couldn't simply walk into his office and announce that his ex-wife was having an affair. She needed to be subtle, strategic, and ultimately convincing. She had to make James want to act against Patricia while believing it was his own idea. At 7:30, she saw James gathering his things to leave. Zoe timed her approach perfectly, arriving at the elevator bank just as he did. "Excuse me, are you James Hamilton?" she asked, extending her hand professionally. "I'm Zoe Parker, I work in marketing consulting. I was hoping I could speak with you about a sensitive business matter involving your former company Sterling and Associates." James looked puzzled but shook her hand. "I'm sorry, but I don't have any current business with Sterling and Associates. My ex-wife works there, but we keep our professional lives separate." "That's actually what I need to discuss with you," Zoe said, lowering her voice. "I've been retained by some employees there to investigate potential misconduct that could affect several businesses in your network. Would you be willing to grab a quick coffee? It won't take long, but I think you'll want to hear what I've discovered." Curiosity won out. 20 minutes later, they were seated in a quiet corner of a nearby hotel lobby, surrounded by the soft murmur of business travelers and the click of laptop keyboards. "I'll be direct," Zoe began, pulling out a tablet loaded with carefully selected evidence. "I've been investigating allegations of misconduct at Sterling and Associates, specifically involving Patricia Hamilton and her abuse of power to engage in inappropriate relationships with subordinates." James's expression shifted from polite interest to sharp attention. "What kind of allegations? Sexual harassment, misuse of company funds, preferential treatment based on personal relationships? The pattern goes back several years, but it's escalated significantly in the past 8 months." Zoe showed him expense reports, email chains, and photos that clearly showed Patricia with Ryan in compromising situations. James studied the evidence carefully, his business-trained mind quickly grasping the implications. "Who retained you to investigate this?" "Several employees who felt they couldn't report through normal channels because Patricia controls the reporting structure. They're concerned about retaliation and wanted an independent investigation." This was technically true, even if Zoe had been the one to suggest they needed professional help to document their concerns. "Why are you showing this to me?" James asked. "I have no authority at Sterling and Associates. Because Patricia is being considered for promotion to regional director. If she gets this position, she'll have even more power to continue this behavior across multiple offices. But more importantly, I know that you and Patricia share several business interests. If this becomes public, the scandal could affect your joint ventures." James set down the tablet and leaned back in his chair. "What exactly are you asking me to do?" "Nothing directly. But Patricia respects your opinion and values your business relationship. If you expressed concerns about her professional conduct, she might be motivated to address these issues before they become public." It was a masterful manipulation. Zoe was giving James the tools to confront Patricia while making it seem like he was protecting his own interests rather than acting on information from a stranger. "I need to think about this," James said finally. "These are serious allegations." "Of course. Take all the time you need." Zoe handed him a business card with her fake consulting company information. "But you should know that other employees are planning to file formal complaints next week. Once that process starts, it becomes very difficult to control the narrative." They parted ways with James promising to consider his options. Zoe was confident he would act quickly. Successful businessmen like James Hamilton didn't tolerate liability, and Patricia's behavior represented a significant threat to their shared interests. Saturday morning, Zoe put the final pieces of her plan into motion. She had scheduled meetings with each of her employee allies, ostensibly to finalize their formal complaints but really to ensure they were all prepared for what was coming. Rebecca Santos was nervous but determined. I've never done anything like this before, but I can't stand by and watch while people's careers are destroyed by favoritism. Jennifer Walsh was angry and ready for action. I've been documenting Patricia's preferential treatment for months. It's time someone held her accountable. Thomas Chen was cautious but convinced. I have emails that show clear policy violations. If the board sees this evidence, they'll have no choice but to act. Each employee had been carefully coached to focus on professional misconduct rather than personal relationships. Zoe had learned that accusations of sexual impropriety could be dismissed as gossip, but documented violations of company policy demanded action. By Sunday evening, everything was in place. Zoe had created a comprehensive investigative report that read like a professional audit. She had witness statements from credible employees. She had financial documentation showing systematic misuse of company resources. Most importantly, she had positioned herself as an independent consultant hired to investigate employee complaints, rather than a vengeful wife seeking personal revenge. Monday would bring the beginning of the end for Patricia Hamilton and Ryan Parker. But first, Zoe had one more performance to give. She needed to play the unknowing wife for 3 more days while her carefully orchestrated plan unfolded. Ryan came home Sunday night with flowers, again more expensive ones this time, as if he sensed that something was wrong. "You've seemed distant lately," he said, kissing her cheek. "Is everything okay?" "Just tired," she replied, accepting the flowers with a smile. "Work has been stressful." "Mine too. But things should calm down after this week. Patricia's promotion should be finalized, and then we can plan that vacation we talked about." The irony was almost too much to bear. Ryan was talking about their future together while his carefully constructed affair was about to implode spectacularly. In 3 days, he would understand exactly what Zoe had been planning while he thought she was being the perfect, trusting wife. "That sounds wonderful," she said, meaning every word. By the time this week was over, she would definitely be ready for a vacation, a celebration of her new life without Ryan and his betrayal. The final act was about to begin. Tuesday morning arrived with deceptive calm. Zoe woke before dawn and lay in bed listening to Ryan's peaceful breathing, knowing it would be one of the last quiet mornings of his life. By Thursday evening, everything he had built with Patricia would be in ruins, and he would finally understand the true cost of his betrayal. At breakfast, Ryan was unusually chatty, excited about Patricia's board presentation scheduled for Thursday afternoon. "She's been preparing for weeks," he said, buttering his toast with obvious pride. "This promotion could change everything for both of us. Patricia says she wants me to be her deputy director when she moves up." Zoe nearly laughed at the irony. "That's wonderful, honey. I'm sure she appreciates having such a dedicated team member." "She does. Patricia always says that loyalty is the most important quality in business." "Loyalty." The word tasted bitter coming from Ryan's mouth, but Zoe simply smiled and refilled his coffee cup. Soon enough, he would learn about real loyalty and the consequences of breaking it. After Ryan left for work, Zoe drove to her staging area, a small office space she had rented under her consulting company name. Today was the day she would make her first official move. Everything had to appear legitimate, professional, and completely independent of her personal connection to the case. At 9 a.m. sharp, she called Sterling and Associates' main number and asked to speak with the board chairman, Robert Sterling himself. "Mr. Sterling, my name is Zoe Parker from Parker Consulting. I specialize in corporate compliance investigations. I've been retained by several of your employees to investigate allegations of serious misconduct within your executive team." There was a pause. "What kind of misconduct?" "Sexual harassment, abuse of power, and misuse of company funds. I have documented evidence that suggests one of your senior executives has been engaging in inappropriate relationships with subordinates and using company resources for personal benefit." "These are very serious allegations." "Yes, sir. I've been conducting this investigation for 2 weeks, and I believe the evidence warrants immediate attention from your board of directors. I'd like to request a meeting to present my findings." Sterling was quiet for a long moment. "Can you be here at 2 o'clock today?" "Absolutely." The call went exactly as Zoe had predicted. Robert Sterling was a conservative businessman who had built his company on reputation and integrity. The suggestion that an executive was engaging in sexual misconduct would demand his immediate attention, especially with the current corporate climate around workplace harassment. Zoe spent the morning perfecting her presentation. She had organized the evidence into categories: financial misconduct, policy violations, abuse of power, and pattern of behavior. Each section was supported by documents, witness statements and photographic evidence that would be impossible to dismiss or explain away. At 1:30, she arrived at Sterling and Associates wearing her most professional suit and carrying a leather briefcase that contained the destruction of Patricia Hamilton's career. The irony wasn't lost on her that she was walking into the same building where she had discovered her husband's betrayal just 3 weeks earlier. Robert Sterling was a tall, distinguished man in his 60s with the bearing of someone accustomed to making difficult decisions. He introduced her to the other board members, CFO Margaret Ross, legal counsel David Kim, and VP of Operations Sarah Martinez. They were exactly the kind of conservative, reputation-conscious executives who would react strongly to evidence of misconduct. "Thank you for meeting with me on such short notice," Zoe began, connecting her laptop to the conference room's presentation system. "What I'm about to show you represents a systematic pattern of misconduct that poses significant legal and financial risks to Sterling and Associates." She started with the financial evidence. Credit card records showing personal charges disguised as business expenses. Hotel bookings that corresponded to no legitimate business travel. Restaurant bills for romantic dinners charged to client development accounts. The numbers were damning, over $30,000 in misappropriated funds over the past year. "This level of financial misconduct exposes the company to theft charges and civil liability," she explained. "But it gets worse." Next came the emails. Carefully selected messages that showed Patricia trading career advancement for personal favors. The progression from professional discussions to explicit arrangements for sexual encounters. The clear abuse of her supervisory authority to coerce subordinates into relationships. The board members' faces grew increasingly grim as Zoe presented each piece of evidence. Margaret Ross took notes furiously. David Kim asked pointed questions about the legal implications. Sarah Martinez looked physically sick as the scope of Patricia's misconduct became clear. "How many employees have come forward?" Robert Sterling asked. 7 so far, but I believe there are others who haven't felt safe reporting. Ms. Hamilton has created a culture of fear where employees believe that crossing her will end their careers." This was partially true. While only 3 employees had directly collaborated with Zoe, her investigation had uncovered evidence of other victims who had been too intimidated to speak up. "What do you recommend?" Sterling asked. "Immediate suspension pending a full investigation. Asset freeze to prevent further misuse of company funds. And a comprehensive review of all promotion and performance decisions made by Ms. Hamilton over the past 2 years." The board members exchanged glances. This was bigger than just one executive's misconduct. It was a systemic failure that could expose the company to millions of dollars in liability from discrimination lawsuits. "We need to handle this very carefully," David Kim said. "If these allegations become public before we've had a chance to investigate properly." "The employees who retain me understand the need for discretion," Zoe assured him. "They want this handled internally if possible. But they also want assurance that the misconduct will stop and that they won't face retaliation for coming forward." "What's your timeline?" Sterling asked. "Ms. Hamilton's promotion is being decided Thursday afternoon. If the board approves her advancement without addressing these allegations, the employees are prepared to file formal complaints with the EOC and the State Attorney General's office." The implied threat was clear: act now or face public scandal and legal consequences. "We'll need to review all of your evidence," Margaret Ross said. "Can you provide copies of everything?" "Of course. I should also mention that I've been in contact with Ms. Hamilton's ex-husband, James Hamilton. He's expressed concerns about how this scandal might affect their shared business interests." This was the final nail in the coffin. If James Hamilton was distancing himself from Patricia, it meant her misconduct was becoming a liability even outside Sterling and Associates. The meeting concluded with the board agreeing to conduct an emergency review of Zoe's evidence and make a decision about Patricia's future by Wednesday evening. They also agreed to postpone Thursday's promotion announcement pending the outcome of their investigation. As Zoe walked back to her car, she allowed herself a small smile. Phase 1 of Thursday's destruction was complete. Patricia would be suspended by tomorrow evening, which would leave her confused, angry, and desperate. She would also be separated from Ryan, who would have no idea what was happening until it was too late to warn him. But Zoe wasn't finished yet. Thursday would bring the public revelation that would destroy not just their careers, but their reputations and their relationship. The real show was just beginning. Wednesday evening brought the call Zoe had been waiting for. Robert Sterling's voice was grim when he reached her at home. "Miss Parker, we've completed our review of your evidence. Patricia Hamilton has been suspended effective immediately, and we're implementing a full investigation. We'll also be contacting law enforcement about the financial misconduct. That's the right decision, Zoe said, maintaining her professional tone while her heart raced with anticipation. What about the promotion announcement? Cancelled indefinitely. We'll be conducting a comprehensive review of all recent promotion decisions to ensure they were based on merit rather than personal relationships. Perfect. Patricia would be blindsided by her suspension, confused about why her carefully planned ascent had suddenly collapsed. She would have no time to warn Ryan or prepare damage control strategies. She would be isolated, vulnerable, and desperate. Thursday morning arrived with unusual tension in the Parker household. Ryan was anxious about Patricia's big presentation, checking his phone constantly for updates that would never come. Patricia seemed stressed about today, he said over breakfast. She was pretty short with everyone yesterday afternoon. Of course she was, Zoe thought. Patricia had just learned that her career was over, even if she didn't understand why yet. I'm sure everything will work out fine, Zoe said, pouring Ryan's coffee with steady hands. Sometimes these big meetings are more routine than they seem. Ryan kissed her goodbye and headed off to what would be his last normal day at Sterling and Associates. Zoe watched him go, then began preparations for the final phase of her plan. At 10 a.m. she received a call from Rebecca Santos. Something strange is happening, Rebecca whispered into the phone. Patricia didn't come in this morning, and there are rumors that the board meeting has been cancelled. Do you think our complaints worked? I think the investigation is moving forward, Zoe said carefully. Just stay calm and keep documenting anything unusual. By noon, the Sterling and Associates office was buzzing with rumors. Patricia's absence had been noticed by everyone, and speculation was running wild. Some employees thought she was sick. Others wondered if she had been fired. The smartest ones suspected something much bigger was happening. Ryan called Zoe twice during the day, his voice increasingly strained. Patricia isn't answering her phone, he said during the second call. Her assistant says she's taking personal time, but that doesn't make sense with the board meeting today. Maybe she's just preparing, Zoe suggested. Big presentations can be overwhelming. But even as she spoke, Zoe knew that Patricia was probably at home, frantically trying to understand why her world was falling apart. The suspension would have come with minimal explanation, just enough to remove her from the building while the investigation proceeded. Thursday evening brought the crescendo Zoe had been orchestrating for weeks. She had planned this moment with the precision of a military operation, timing every element for maximum impact. At 5:30 she called Ryan at the office. "Honey, I have a surprise for you," she said, her voice bright with false excitement. "I've arranged a celebration dinner for your promotion. I invited some colleagues to join us at Romano's restaurant downtown." But Patricia never confirmed. "She did. She called me this afternoon to say how proud she is of your hard work. She'll be there at 7 o'clock with some other executives. She wanted it to be a surprise. Of course Patricia would not be there. She was suspended and had no idea about any dinner. But Ryan didn't know that yet. That's amazing. Thank you, baby. I love you." "I love you too," Zoe said, and for the first time in weeks she meant it. She loved him enough to give him exactly what he deserved. Romano's restaurant was perfect for Zoe's purposes, upscale enough to attract business dinners, but with an open layout that would ensure maximum visibility for what was about to unfold. She arrived early and confirmed the private dining room she had reserved, complete with projection equipment for a special presentation. At 6:45, Zoe positioned herself at the restaurant's entrance, greeting colleagues as they arrived. She had invited everyone who mattered: Rebecca Santos and her documentation of expense report irregularities, Jennifer Walsh and her evidence of discriminatory promotion practices, Thomas Chin and his emails showing preferential treatment. She had also invited several board members, James Hamilton, and a few key clients who would spread word of the evening's events throughout their professional networks. Ryan arrived at exactly 7 o'clock, looking confused by the crowd but pleased by what he assumed was recognition of his professional success. He greeted everyone warmly, accepting congratulations and praise for his hard work and dedication. "Where's Patricia?" he asked Zoe quietly. "She's running a few minutes late," Zoe replied. "Why don't we get started with drinks?" At 7:15, with everyone seated and relaxed, Zoe stood up to address the group. "Thank you all for coming tonight," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the dining room. "We're here to celebrate excellence in the workplace and to recognize outstanding contributions to Sterling and Associates." Ryan beamed with pride, completely unaware of what was about to happen. "As many of you know, I work in corporate consulting, specializing in workplace compliance and ethical business practices. Over the past few weeks, I've been conducting an investigation that has revealed some very interesting patterns of behavior within Sterling and Associates. The room grew quiet. Ryan's smile faltered slightly as he began to sense that something was wrong. What I've discovered is a systematic abuse of power that has corrupted the promotion process, misappropriated company funds, and created a hostile work environment for honest employees. Zoe activated the presentation system, and the first slide appeared on the wall. Expense reports showing $30,000 in questionable charges. These financial records show how company resources have been used to fund personal relationships rather than legitimate business activities. Ryan had gone pale. He was staring at the screen with growing horror as he recognized charges he had assumed were confidential. The next slides showed email chains, photos, and documentation of the affair. Each piece of evidence was presented with clinical precision, building an undeniable case of professional misconduct and personal betrayal. The impact of this behavior extends far beyond financial losses, Zoe continued. Qualified employees have been passed over for promotion. Company policies have been violated. Trust has been broken. She clicked to a slide showing Ryan and Patricia together in a hotel room, the timestamp clearly visible. Ryan made a strangled sound and half rose from his chair. Ladies and gentlemen, I present the true cost of corruption in the workplace. The final slide was devastating, a side-by-side comparison of Ryan's qualifications versus other candidates for promotion, clearly showing that his advancement was based on his relationship with Patricia rather than merit. The room was dead silent. Ryan was standing now, his face a mask of shock and humiliation. Several colleagues were staring at him with expressions ranging from disgust to pity. This investigation was conducted at the request of Sterling and Associates employees who were concerned about ethical violations, Zoe concluded. The evidence speaks for itself. Robert Sterling stood up slowly. Ryan Parker, your employment with Sterling and Associates is terminated effective immediately. Security will escort you from any company premises, and you will be hearing from our legal department regarding restitution for misappropriated funds. Ryan's legs gave out and he collapsed back into his chair. Zoe, why would you? Because I'm your wife, she said simply. And wives notice when their husbands lie to them. The revelation hit the room like a bomb. Suddenly, everyone understood that this wasn't just a corporate investigation, it was personal justice served with professional precision. James Hamilton approached the presentation screen, studying the financial evidence with obvious anger. Patricia will be hearing from my attorneys about how this affects our business partnerships. One by one, the dinner guests filed out, leaving Ryan alone at the table with the ruins of his career and marriage scattered around him like broken glass. Zoe gathered her presentation materials calmly, then walked over to where Ryan sat staring at his hands. The divorce papers will be filed tomorrow, she said quietly. I've already moved my things out of the house. You can keep it, you'll need somewhere to live while you look for a new job. Zoe, please? Please what? Please forgive you? Please pretend this never happened? Please let you destroy my life while you build a new one with someone else? Ryan looked up at her with tears in his eyes. I never meant for this to happen. Yes, you did. Every lie you told, every secret meeting you arranged, every time you used our marriage as cover for your affair, you meant for it to happen. You just didn't mean to get caught. She picked up her purse and walked toward the exit, then paused at the door. By the way, Patricia won't be able to help you anymore. She was suspended yesterday and will probably be facing criminal charges for theft. I hope 8 months of hotel rooms was worth both your careers. As Zoe left Romano's restaurant, she felt something she hadn't experienced in months: peace. The betrayal still hurt, but the pain was manageable now that justice had been served. Ryan and Patricia had chosen to destroy her marriage, so she had chosen to destroy everything they had built together. It was exactly what they deserved. 6 months later, Zoe stood in the floor-to-ceiling windows of her new office overlooking downtown, watching the city come alive with morning energy. Parker Consulting had grown from a fictional cover story into a thriving business, specializing in corporate compliance investigations and workplace ethics training. The irony wasn't lost on her that her husband's betrayal had inadvertently launched her most successful career venture. The Sterling and Associates case had become legendary in corporate investigation circles. Patricia Hamilton and Ryan Parker had both pled guilty to theft charges and were serving 18 months in minimum security prison. Patricia's professional reputation was so thoroughly destroyed that she would never work in corporate management again. Ryan had found employment at a small accounting firm, making a third of his former salary and living in a studio apartment across town. But more satisfying than their punishment was Zoe's own transformation. She had discovered a talent for investigation and justice that she never knew she possessed. Her phone rang constantly with requests from companies seeking to address misconduct, from employees needing protection from retaliation, and from other betrayed spouses who had heard about her methods through word of mouth. "Zoe?" Her assistant's voice came through the intercom. "Your 2 o'clock appointment is here. Send him in, please." The door opened to admit Gabriel Morrison, a partner at one of the city's most prestigious law firms. Tall, silver-haired, and impeccably dressed, he carried himself with the confidence of someone accustomed to winning difficult cases. He had been helping Zoe navigate the legal complexities of her divorce and the subsequent civil suits, but their professional relationship had gradually evolved into something more personal. "How did the deposition go?" he asked, settling into the chair across from her desk. "Better than expected." Patricia's attorney tried to claim that Ryan was the instigator and that she was just an innocent victim of his manipulation. Gabriel laughed. "Hard to argue that theory when you have photos of her with 3 other subordinates over the past 5 years. The investigation had continued to expand long after Ryan and Patricia's initial arrests. Other victims had come forward, other instances of misconduct had been discovered, and the full scope of Patricia's abuse of power had been revealed. Sterling and Associates had settled multiple lawsuits for a total of $8 million and had completely restructured their executive team. "Justice has a way of expanding when you give it room to work," Zoe said. "I've learned that most people who abuse power don't do it just once. They do it repeatedly until someone stops them." "Is that why you turned down the Netflix documentary offer?" Zoe smiled. 3 different production companies had approached her about telling her story, fascinated by the combination of personal betrayal and professional investigation that had brought down 2 corrupt executives. But she had declined them all. "I'm not interested in being famous for being cheated on," she said. "I'd rather be known for the work I'm doing now." And the work was satisfying in ways she had never expected. Just last month, she had helped expose a CEO who was embezzling funds from his company's charity division. The month before, she had documented sexual harassment at a tech startup, leading to policy changes that protected dozens of employees. Each case was different, but they all shared the same core truth. People with power often abused it unless someone held them accountable. "Speaking of work," Gabriel said, "I have something that might interest you." He pulled out a file folder and placed it on her desk. "Hamilton Industries, James Hamilton's company, is having some issues with their new CFO. Expense irregularities, questions about vendor relationships, employees who are afraid to speak up. Sound familiar?" Zoe opened the file and scanned the preliminary information. The patterns were indeed familiar: personal expenses disguised as business costs, preferential treatment for certain employees, a culture of fear around reporting misconduct. "James wants to hire you to investigate?" she asked. "He specifically requested you. Says he trusts your methods and your discretion." It was interesting how life came full circle. James Hamilton had been instrumental in Patricia's downfall, providing insider information about her past misconduct that had strengthened Zoe's case. Now he needed her expertise to protect his own company from similar corruption. "I'll take the case," she said. "But I work alone and I report directly to the board of directors. No interference, no politics, just facts and evidence." "That's exactly what James hoped you'd say." Gabriel stood to leave, then paused at the door. "There's something else. Amanda and I are having dinner tomorrow night at Chez Laurent. Would you like to join us?" Amanda was Gabriel's daughter, a brilliant law student who reminded Zoe of herself at that age: ambitious, principled, and unwilling to compromise her values for anyone. The 3 of them had become close over the past few months, forming an unlikely family unit built on mutual respect and shared values rather than traditional obligations. "I'd love to," Zoe said. "But I'm paying this time. I just closed the Morrison Industries case and I feel like celebrating." After Gabriel left, Zoe turned back to the window and reflected on how much her life had changed. 6 months ago, she had been a betrayed wife with no idea how to rebuild her shattered world. Today, she was a successful entrepreneur, a respected investigator, and a woman who had learned that the best revenge wasn't destruction, it was transformation. Her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Miss Parker, I saw the article about your work in Business Weekly. My boss is stealing from our pension fund, and I don't know what to do. Can you help?" Zoe smiled and typed back, "Send me the details. Justice doesn't take days off." She had found her calling in the ruins of her marriage. Every corrupt executive she exposed, every abuse of power she documented, every victim she helped protect was a small victory against the kind of selfishness and betrayal that had nearly destroyed her own life. Ryan had thought he could lie and cheat his way to success, using Patricia's influence and Zoe's trust to build his perfect life. Instead, he had inadvertently created something much more powerful: a woman who refused to be a victim and who had turned her pain into purpose. The divorce had been finalized 3 months ago. Ryan had kept the house as Zoe had promised, but he couldn't afford the mortgage payments on his reduced salary. It was now in foreclosure, which seemed like poetic justice for a man who had mortgaged his integrity for a relationship that lasted less than a year. Patricia had tried to contact Zoe twice from prison, claiming she wanted to apologize and take responsibility for her actions. Zoe had ignored both letters. Some people deserved forgiveness, but Patricia Hamilton wasn't one of them. The woman had spent years destroying careers and corrupting businesses for her own gratification. 8 months in prison was hardly adequate punishment for the damage she had caused. As the sun set over the city, Zoe gathered her things and prepared to leave the office. Tomorrow would bring new cases, new investigations, new opportunities to hold powerful people accountable for their actions. It was work that mattered, work that made a difference, work that had grown out of her determination to turn betrayal into justice. On her way out, she passed the framed article from Business Weekly hanging in her reception area. The headline read, "The Investigator Who Started as a Victim: How Zoe Parker Built a Business on Corporate Justice." Below it was a photo of her sitting at her desk, looking confident and professional. The woman in that photo bore little resemblance to the heartbroken wife who had discovered her husband's affair 6 months ago. That woman had been naive, trusting, willing to believe the best about people even when evidence suggested otherwise. This woman was wiser, stronger, and infinitely more dangerous to anyone who thought they could abuse their power without consequences. As Zoe walked to her car, she reflected on the lesson that Ryan and Patricia had inadvertently taught her. Betrayal reveals character. Not just the character of the person doing the betraying, but the character of the person being betrayed. Some people crumble under that kind of pain. Others use it as fuel to build something better. She had chosen to build something better, and the result was a life that was richer, more meaningful, and more satisfying than anything she had shared with Ryan. He had given her the greatest gift possible, though he would never understand it. He had forced her to discover who she really was when everything she thought she knew about herself was stripped away. The betrayal had ended her marriage, but it had begun her real life. And for that, despite everything, she was almost grateful. 6 months ago, Zoe Parker had been someone's wife. Today she was herself, and that was infinitely more valuable than any relationship built on lies. The sun set behind her as she drove toward home, toward dinner with Gabriel and Amanda, toward a future that belonged entirely to her. It was exactly the ending she deserved.